You're listening to the Subject Matter Expert podcast powered by KISS PR Brand Story, and I'm your host, Qamar Zaman. On the show today, I have a pleasure of having with me Denis Sarakov. Denis is a CEO at Throne PR, a public relations-based company in New York City, and he has an extensive portfolio of successful PR and digital marketing campaigns in the area of crypto and blockchain. Denis is a great friend. We work together on many projects. And today I offered Denis to come and help me to understand public relations, and especially the product announcements when they are done. Today we are discussing how we can leverage product announcements in 2022. Denis, how are you doing today?
Hello, Qamar. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Thank you. So Denis, help us understand before we go into the topic itself. Give us a little context about you so our audience can get to know you, and then we'll go further into the question of the day.
Thank you. It's great, again, a great pleasure to be here with you. And let's talk about all things PR, I guess, right? I actually have a background in broadcast journalism. I was an anchor. I got my degree in broadcast journalism from the University of Missouri-Columbia School of Journalism. It's the oldest school of journalism in the world. And that's where I got my undergraduate. I also got my master's in media management. I worked for several broadcast and print outlets, and then I decided to switch hats and to start a career in marketing and subsequently in PR, because I found that one of my greatest teachers in media management sequence at the University of Missouri, Professor Charlie Warner, told us that there's always a lot of differences. You can find a lot of differences between the news department and the sales and marketing department, because for example, at a TV station, and there's like two different hats that they exist, and it was very interesting for me to explore the other side, so to speak, not only the news, but kind of see the business side of it. And then that's what when I did media marketing for media groups and media companies. But then I started a company with a focus on technology, startups, and worked with different projects in the past 5 years. So that's sort of the journey that I've been on, and my career spans over past 20 plus years.
Wow, interesting. And I'll ask you some follow-up questions, but let's go into the PR and communication. So my first question that I get asked for my clients, because most of the people come to us and say, well, I want to be in a big PR. And I'll ask them, what do you mean by that? I want to be in a big newspaper. And can I get in there? And I said, well, let's do a PR. But they are expecting, most clients are expecting that, I have a great story and I just want to be showing up in some, newspaper. And I want you to dispel the myth. And if you think that's not the way to do it, and what is the right way to do it? So can you help us understand that?
That's a great question. I as much as I don't think that there's a sort of a universal recipe for everyone, I think it really the devil's in the details, and you have to look at each particular industry that the company is working in, or maybe a different stage of the company, whether it's a startup or whether it's a well-established company. Probably the methods are going to be different, but at the same time, I think that there are sort of universal characteristics of successful campaign that companies can learn how to do and how to achieve great results. First of all, I strongly believe that there's no such thing as too much PR. Obviously, there's publicity is something. We live in an extremely high-paced world, and announcements that are made, they get diluted, dissolved in the huge volumes of sort of a cluster of media voices, and a lot of times you really, the attention span gets shorter and shorter, just because there's so many different media channels and so many different opportunities to present yourself. So it's very important to consistently remind both your core audiences, which would be sort of your internal audiences, such as maybe your social media fans, or somebody who is subscribed to your, I don't know, corporate newsletter and things like that, but also for the external audiences. And those are obviously, could be the whole world, or could be any particular market that you want to expand. So that the corporate communication landscape has changed, I believe, in the past years. You have to be creative. Look at what Elon Musk is doing with each announcement, surprises everybody. And like just now, I read that he announced a new product, the phone, right? He announced it and surprised everybody. So you have to really become creative with both the messaging itself and with the structure, sort of the way you do it. So I don't know. I can go further into details and into more like the recipes, but stop me if you think we're deviating from.
Let's slow down, and I can ask you the follow-on question. So you just made a statement right now, and you said that there are two audiences, internal and external. I've never heard somebody say that in the way you explained it. So a lot of people think, okay, I'm going to do an announcement, and they always think about external. They never think about internal communication. So even doing a PR to your internal communication is important, because you must remind people that we exist, and here's another announcement, like you said, mentioned Elon. So that's a great thing. So now help me understand, you've been doing PR marketing 20 years. What has changed in those last 19 years? And then last year was a very disruptive year for everyone with the COVID-19. So help us understand that.
Yes, definitely the past, I would say it's almost 2 years, right? I think in February we'll unfortunately not celebrate, but we'll mark the 2-year anniversary of the grim events in the world when the coronavirus has hit and disrupted all our lives. Definitely, I mean, it's probably hard to try to reflect on all these years, right? In the media, there are a lot of different things, and I remember studying PR. Our professor in college of public relations was a senior PR person from working for IBM at headquarters in Chicago, I believe. And I remember completely different what PR was back then and what the PR is now. So if you're talking about just an overall campaign, you have to be very crisp with messaging. You have to be language has to be certain, structure, sentence structures, and even the delivery of the messaging has to be sort of on par with the reality. Definitely, in the past 2 years, I think that we have shifted to not working in offices and working. A lot of people are working from home. Journalists are working from home. Let's keep in mind that PR, press releases, they are primarily, their function is to inform media and media representatives. So traditionally, for example, there were certain rules that, corporate rules, so to speak, that were set by larger corporate, publicly, maybe sometimes public traded companies and others, that there's certain standards to, when you make the announcement of your of your achievement or milestone or something. It could be on a certain time, certain day. Tuesday, Thursday were supposed to be like the best day to announce things, but things are slightly different because it's not 9 to 5 anymore. I think that's one of the biggest issues is that sometimes we journalists are working on different schedules and different time zones. I think we have become a global world, so you have to consider. For example, I have several clients that I work with. They cater to particular time zones that are not necessarily Western 9 to 5. They cater to Asian markets when they open, and so these announcements are made at night. So there's so many factors and so many different layers.
Right.
It'd probably be impossible to to mention all of them within one particular call. But I think overall the core, the main things are that it's more competitive, that it's not as structured in terms of time frame, because you want to get a different time zone, work in different time zone to get different audiences and markets attention. It's more global, and then you shouldn't limit yourself. I mean, one thing that you and I remember, we've talked about that a lot of times companies and their PR divisions and PR heads, they heads of PR departments, they limit themselves to just announcement, and forgetting that a successful outreach, successful reach to media does not stop at just sending out a press release. I mean, you and I have talked about that, and I'll be happy to cover more.
Sure. Right. So the key takeaway is that PR has changed from past years to the current, because I remember, working with PR, that there was a certain date and time. If you did it, like the very first time I did a PR with a big PR service, and I put 9 o'clock, 9 a.m. for the PR to go out, I got a call from the editorial and said, "Can we make it to 9:05?" And they said to me, I said, "Why 9:05?" It says, "If you do it at 9:05, you're supposed to get a better pickup." So I learned from that, but now that, that changed. So things have changed. Exactly. Fast forward to another question. When the PR is done and you make a mistake, in the past, it was a done deal. Mistakes could not be reversed. Announcements. What's your thoughts on it? When the mistake is done, how do you roll back to it?
Well,
from your experience with the clients,
right.
There is an operation technique which we know how to do, but how do you deal with that situation when your client says send it out, and then 10 minutes later says no, pull it back? How do you deal with
damage control, right?
Yeah.
The notorious damage control from whatever it is. Well, I mean, that's when great. Well, usually, I mean, ideally, it's important not to to warn and work with your company and your client that and warn them a million times that we're truly setting it on stone, even though it's not. But figuratively speaking, whatever stays in there. It goes to multiple channels, to a lot of different channels, and especially if you do a proper search engine optimization and other different things, which you are a great expert on that, definitely on SEO, on knowing how to properly run a press release service. I think you are one of the best. KSPR is one of the best companies in the world that does that. I truly believe that, because I personally have tried just about every service there is, and you and I, we've talked about that a lot, about the competitive landscape and other things. But back to your question. So what do you do with when you need to when there is you need to do some damage control, right? Well, it's not easy, and it can be a costly thing to do. And but I honestly think that you know it best that they're, we obviously advise our clients to never try to change to check and recheck their facts, to check and recheck their quotes, and their statements about themselves, graphics, images, all the components that make a great visual presentation, even the video links, right? But things do happen, and there are only very few companies that it's a tedious process because, think about it. We've talked about that. It goes to hundreds of sites. It gets Google indexed in multiple pages, sometimes 10 pages deep in Google, right? One release can go that deep. And then if you also pitch it and you get some additional coverage with that it becomes a very difficult task to correct something. I mean, it's possible, and you can do it. I know, but it involves a lot of resources, and it's difficult, and it takes time. That's
to crystallize it. To crystallize the answer, tell the client to basically manage the client's expectations. Things can be edited, but not that easy, because you know it, I know it, this happens, but sometimes it happens with a mistake. Sometimes it happens because the legal departments tell them, no, roll back because we didn't cover it. So that's another thing that sometimes the legal departments. Interesting.
Compliance, legal departments. There's a lot of reservations and restrictions. There are hindsight, but hindsight in PR is not the best thing, as we know.
Yes, exactly. So
because
going
go
into PR, you work with a lot of startups.
Yes.
Okay. And I think 90% of your book of business is crypto and blockchain. Help us understand when a startup comes to you and what are their expectations out of you as a PR ninja? What are they expecting from you? And obviously you continue to deliver. So what is it that you are providing to them and they are getting good results? I've always wanted to ask you this question.
Yes, and I have an answer ready for you. I think that a lot of agencies, and I've told it to many clients of mine, PR industry in general has sort of sometimes, not all of them obviously, but sometimes in some minds of company heads, even startups and other, because a lot of these startups that I work with, the CEO of the companies and people who start them, they have already built some notoriety and reputation in different industries and fields, and in technology primarily, right? In tech industry, but they've dealt at some point they've dealt with PR agencies and PR professionals, and not, unfortunately, sometimes our colleagues do have sort of bad reputation, and the reason why is because I use this analogy with with sports. I remember watching a sports show, and a commentator was talking about a hockey team that did a lot of great things but just couldn't score. And a lot of times this is sort of a not a standard, but a lot of times it's a practice that a company does not, a PR agency, I'm sorry, does not deliver results even though they play well, or so to speak. But I think it becomes frustrating because obviously the bottom line is getting you exposure and getting good exposure in great outlets. It's very important to support your announcement, to support your news, and I think of our service as primarily not a PR distribution or not just outreach, but sort of a comprehensive message delivery sort of way or system that is sort of our know-how. And what I mean by that is that we use different various tools to make sure that we get our message across. We use some of the best outreach systems. We have developed relationship with journalists and editors that they can trust us, because again, it comes from the territory. A lot of times, if you are coming to PR from, I don't know, some general communications field or other industries, you may not. Sometimes, I'm not saying it's always the case, but a lot of times there's a gap. So this cognitive gap with the journalist, because journalists is a special breed, a special bunch, and if they sense some people who understand it from the inside, who's been in the newsroom, who've been under deadlines, and it does help. I work, for example, a couple of guys in my company. They have also masters in journalism. They've been working on different in different assignment roles, and so to speak. So it's much more than just a distribution. It's a comprehensive way with a lot of different insightful advice, so to speak, for your company. Whether it's trying to get them to speak at different conferences by utilizing your relationships, or be very creative with pitching, or offering to have a thought leadership article where they can present their view on the industry or in any particular development. So it's a very complex and comprehensive way of engaging media that provides sort of results that are expected, and that's what we try to do.
I've noticed one thing, that the hardcore news reporter from the newsrooms, they don't think much of a PR, because they feel that the PR can be manipulated. So when you talk to, like, reach out to a reporter on LinkedIn, for example, and say, hey, I'm a public relations consultant, I'd like to work with you. First of all, they don't want to even reply to you. But if they do, they'll say, we don't like PR. Like, it feels like the typical journalist feels that PR is like something they need to stay away from. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes. I think that's there is this issue, because again, I think it has to do with trust, and with developing this trust, and knowing the source of where it's coming from. But I actually, that's, what do you think? What do you think? I'll answer that, but I want to hear from you first. Like, what do you think is why do you think that? And I'll add to that. What do you think, Qamar?
I think there is a prejudice against the PR and journalists. They feel that I work really hard and I make this a story, and these guys are just coming and pitching these stories, and they are polluting the news content. That's why, when we are talking to the newsrooms and say, hey, we send out 1,000 releases, we would like to get these press releases out into your newsroom. Like, if they have a big local newspaper, for example, X Morning News or something, and we say, we have great stories, we would like to feed into you. They'll say, no, we don't like those type of stories. But they will take them from the big corporations. I feel there is just a prejudice. They just don't think PR as legit, because it can be manipulated, because there's no fact check on PR. It's just automated pretty much. You buy it, publish it, distribute it. So they feel not so comfortable about it.
Yes, but I do think that they, at least from my experience, obviously it's impossible to get into their heads, right? How they think and what they think. But in certain industries, I do think they tend to know sort of the legitimate players. I mean, and another thing I've noticed is it's a very interesting phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
All the sort of companies and businesses that don't belong,
Mm-hmm.
they sort of weed out. At
Yes.
least in technology, I see that all the time. They don't stay. They may pay for a press release, an announcement,
Yeah.
but it's not it's not it doesn't last. And when you're in this business for 3, 4, 5 years, all the it really, like in anything else, it becomes a sort of a closed community, a closed circle of people. You keep running over, or you understand, you see the same people, same companies, and well, I mean, there are always new players,
Yeah.
right? But if they're legitimate and large players and worth attention, then they get that attention, and they get included into this
Yeah.
sort of community. But I think it's in every industry. It's like that, and
That's
in
true.
our industry as
That
well.
is very true. Yeah.
So it's sort of a self-monitoring, self-control, and when you send a lot of pitches. I'll give another example. When you send a lot of pitches to journalists, right? I mean, they're monitoring tools, whether they use like Cision or Meltwater or any other
Yeah.
system. There's monitoring tools that allow you to sort of analyze your unsubscribe rate and your open rate and so on and so forth. So you can see as a source of delivering press releases, not only through the wires, but also through
Yeah.
sometimes sending directly to your targeted journalists, right? Because you can simultaneously do that as well.
Yeah.
And you can see how people react to it. And obviously they're all opted in. You're not spamming anybody, but
Yeah.
you send it to opted in contacts, and it becomes a newsletter. They become your readers, even though they
Yeah.
may not react to your announcement immediately. They could put it in the back of their head, the back of their mind, and they may act on it when the time comes, when they are working on a story. That especially is true for large outlets such as Forbes, Bloomberg, and
Yeah.
CNBC and others that are highly desired by many, many technology clients.
So to wrap up, what is one key takeaway that you will give somebody that is listening to this podcast, that to build credibility and to send out PR, what is one thing that Dennis would say in 60 seconds or less?
I'll try. Well, I think that it's very important to develop quality messaging, find the right target, the right audience, find a very reputable PR partner or partners, and don't have gaps. Do not have gaps. I think the most important thing is to be consistent with your PR efforts. Is because attention span is short, and you have to make sure you engage audience consistently. I would say that probably
that's
one of the most
great key
things.
takeaway. No spam, don't build gaps, and be a trustworthy partner. Find a trustworthy partner. Thank you so much for your insight for product announcements, PR in 2022. We'll be talking more around the middle of 2020 to see how we are doing. Thanks for coming over. And we'll be talking, if you want to leave, how they can find you, what's the information, where can they find you?
Oh, yeah, sure. My email is Dennis with one N, DENIS @thronepr.com. ThronePR is one word. Dennis @thronepr.com. And Qamar, thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you. Wonderful.
Bye.